morning and welcome to the show. I'm Dominic Chu, live at CNBC Global Headquarters. We begin this morning with more breaking news. Stocks set to surge at the opening bell, with the Dow futures indicating that the Dow could open up by another 555 points. That's off the best levels of the pre-market session. The S&P up by an implied 56 points and 140 points more for the NASDAQ. Now, all of this would be normally, it would have been a historic rally for Wall Street, with the Dow surging more than 1,600 points in a single day just yesterday, but it was only the blue chips' best day since March 24th, and only its third biggest point gain ever. Heading into this morning's trade, the Dow and the S&P 500 remain more than 20% below their all-time highs. The NASDAQ just about 19% below its record high, but we were up some 21% for the S&P 500 since the intraday lows that we saw back last month. Team coverage now kicks off your Tuesday morning. Matt Taylor is in Singapore with the latest in the overnight action in Asia. Juliana Tattlebaum with the early trade in Europe. NBC's Tracy Potts has the headlines out of Washington, D.C. Steve Sedgwick is covering the latest from Boris Johnson, the UK Prime Minister, and Rahel Solomon is here at CNBC Global Headquarters with stories on the virus and the corporate response. Matt Taylor, we begin with you.
Hi there, Dom. We did see a mostly positive session across the Asian market today, although a number of these markets are really closing well and truly off of the high point of the session. Let's give you a look at Japan, because we have had some breaking news just in the last few minutes. The Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe declaring a state of emergency in 7 prefectures in Japan, including Tokyo and Osaka. The aim there is to reduce movement by 70 to 80%, and the government also approving as well an emergency economic stimulus package as well. This just crossing, as we speak, around about $1 trillion. So the Japanese market, of course, closed out for the day already, but it was up by about 2% before we've just been getting all of these headlines out of the Japanese Prime Minister. Shanghai back from a break. Of course, it was closed yesterday for a public holiday. We saw some positivity there. Also in Hong Kong as well. Take a look at South Korea. It performed fairly robustly as well. This was helped out by a jump in shares of Samsung, the electronics giant, saying it sees its Q1 operating profit above analyst expectations at 6.4 trillion Korean won, and analysts had expected around about 6.2 trillion. So that really helped out that stock today and helped push out the Kospi overall into positive territory. Australia was the laggard. We had that market trading weaker in the session today. The Reserve Bank, they're keeping interest rates unchanged, as is widely expected, because they've already cut them down to just 0.25 percentage point, but adding that it will continue to support financial market liquidity through its recently announced QE program as well. So that is the movers in Asia today. Dom, back to you.
All right, Matt Taylor, thank you very much for that. To the early trade now with the European bourses. Juliana Tattlebaum is standing by in London with the latest there. Good morning, Juliana.
Good morning. Well, European markets are rallying strongly this morning, extending yesterday's gains. The main benchmark yesterday gained 3.7%, and now today we're seeing a really broad-based rally take place. There is a stronger demand for those cyclical parts of the market. Investors here are taking some encouragement from early signals that the pandemic could be easing in parts of Europe, in particular those parts of Europe that have been hardest hit, the likes of Spain and Italy. On the flip side, the more defensive parts of the market are underperforming this morning. So you've got travel and leisure and autos performing very, very strongly as investors put money back into those stocks. On the flip side, healthcare, one of the most defensive parts of the market that's been very well bid over the last few weeks, is underperforming. In addition to some of the macro drivers that are underpinning the strength this morning, some individual stories also in focus, with more companies taking measures to shore up their balance sheets. We had aerospace and defense supplier Thales, for example, cutting its dividend and suspending its outlook. So more measures like that coming through and supporting market sentiment. Back to you.
All right, Juliana Tattlebaum live in London with the latest there on the European market. Sticking with the United Kingdom, Prime Minister Boris Johnson was moved to the intensive care unit, the ICU, late yesterday as his coronavirus symptoms took a turn for the worse. He was diagnosed first with the virus more than a week ago. Our own Steve Sedgwick joins us now from London with the latest on the UK Prime Minister. Steve.
Dom, it was the 27th of March, as you say, where Boris Johnson was diagnosed having positive tests for coronavirus. Last Friday, April the 3rd as well, he said he was continuing his self-isolation in the flat above number 11 Downing Street, which is the Chancellor of the Exchequer's home, because his symptoms were persisting. But yesterday, of course, we heard that he had been transferred to a central London hospital. We came here to St Thomas's assuming this was that hospital, which was since confirmed. But from 7 p.m. yesterday evening, the Prime Minister was transferred, as you say, to an intensive care unit after his persistent conditions were getting worse. We understand both a fever and a cough. We understand also that the Prime Minister was given several litres of oxygen, although he was not put on a ventilator in ICU. The whole point about putting him in ICU as well, according to number 10 Downing Street, was precautionary, but also so that the availability of a ventilator was on hand if indeed needed. Now, who is running the country now at the moment? Well, up until yesterday lunchtime, we had the Prime Minister apparently looking at his official messages and documents in his official red box and tweeting early afternoon that he was receiving good coverage and good health care from the National Health Service and that he was in good spirits. But then, as I say, we heard later on that now Dominic Raab, who is the 46-year-old Foreign Secretary, also First Secretary of State, would be deputising for the Prime Minister if and when necessary. But in the United Kingdom, we do not have, Dom, a formal plan of succession.
All right, so Steve, as you talk about what Dominic Raab then is looking to perhaps do or get done in the absence of Prime Minister Boris Johnson, what exactly is first and foremost on the agenda as Boris Johnson starts to recover in the ICU?
Yeah, absolutely, Dom. Well, look, the key here, of course, is to reach the peak of coronavirus, both mortalities and infections, and get beyond that peak, which is the key for whether it's New York State, whether it's Italy, France or Spain. The same in the United Kingdom. Last night, we had confirmed that another 439 mortalities from coronavirus happened, taking the UK total up to 5,373. But the key priorities at the moment are making sure there are enough ICU beds around the entire country. And, of course, we've seen this brand new field hospital from scratch in the east of the city of London, built 4,000-bed, 82-ward hospital built from scratch in 9 days by the British Army engineers and indeed the National Health Service. So it's getting more ICU beds, getting more testing done as well. It has been a big criticism of the government. There haven't been enough tests compared with countries such as Germany. And, of course, getting the frontline workers at the NHS hospitals like the one behind me, getting them enough PPE, protective equipment, Dom. These are the key priorities.
All right, Steve Sedgwick live in London with the latest on the UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Thank you very much. To Washington, D.C. now, where talk of a fourth economic stimulus package is gaining some momentum. This as the New York Times reports one of the high-ranking officials in the White House sounded the alarm over a potential U.S. outbreak months before it manifested itself here. NBC's Tracy Potts joins us now from Washington, D.C. with the latest. Tracy, good morning.
Dom, good morning. That was the U.S. Trade Rep Peter Navarro. According to the Times, he wrote a memo back in January warning that this would be a major pandemic, that as many as 500,000 people could die in the United States without some aggressive action. Here's a piece of that memo where Peter Navarro said that Americans could be left defenseless against a full-blown coronavirus. He went on to say that this could evolve into a full-blown pandemic, imperiling the lives of millions of Americans, which is exactly what we've seen. Now, his memo back in January went to the National Security Council, several other officials. We don't know if President Trump saw it himself. Speaking of President Trump, he is now saying that he is willing to back some sort of stimulus package, a second stimulus. Democrats are laying out what they think that needs to include. Nancy Pelosi telling NBC last night that it will likely be over $1 trillion, including more money for small businesses to pay their bills and pay their workers, more for extended unemployment insurance. Plus, they want to include funds for food stamps and for perhaps a second round of direct payments to Americans who are struggling to make ends meet. Noticeably missing from that list is infrastructure projects. Is something that Pelosi may be backing off of to try to get the support of Republicans in the Senate. Tom?
Tracy, I mean, President Trump is saying that there's a light at the end of the tunnel with regard to coronavirus vaccine research, with regard to treatment research. Is there any sense right now of even more policies or initiatives tilted towards that angle, and any more messaging coming from the White House to that effect in the coming days?
Yeah, good question. We don't know if they're going to try to pack some money for increased research into the second stimulus. Certainly, they are working on it. The FDA is monitoring what's happening, trying to get a vaccine or any other treatments out as quickly as possible. But we've known from the beginning that's going to be a long-term effort. And this virus is having an impact right now.
All right, Tracy Potts, thank you very much, live from Washington, D.C. with the latest there. Now, all of this is coming as the U.S. death toll from coronavirus hits 10,000 for the first time ever. Rahel Solomon is here with more details on the latest headlines there. Good morning, Rahel.
Hi, Dom. Good morning. So in light of that number, the nation's top infectious disease expert, Dr. Anthony Fauci, says the world may never get back to normal. At the daily White House briefing yesterday, Dr. Fauci said that despite there being a number of therapies and vaccines in the pipeline, quote, if you want to get to pre-coronavirus, that might not ever happen in the sense that the threat is there. President Trump also announcing that the U.S. has struck a deal to buy millions of N95 face masks from 3M for healthcare workers. The president, of course, had been in a bit of a dispute with the company after asking 3M to stop selling those protective masks overseas. Under the deal, 3M will import 166 million masks over the next 3 months, primarily from its factories in China. And the U.S. government's new program to help small businesses weather the coronavirus outbreak looks like it may have hit some snags. The $350 program launched on Friday. Banks say that the Small Business Administration system used to process loan applications crashed for several hours yesterday. And Politico reporting that banks also still do not have a key form that's needed to complete the loans. President Trump did address this issue at yesterday's White House briefing.
As of today, tens of thousands of small businesses have applied for more than $40 billion in relief under the Paycheck Protection Program. You've all been reading about it, and it's really, it's only been going for a couple of days. It's really been performing well. A couple of little glitches, minor glitches that have already been taken care of.
Also, an SBA spokesperson saying that as of 6 p.m. Eastern last night, the system is, quote, up and running. Dom, let's hope that remains the case because, of course, as you know, millions of Americans are counting on that for some sort of relief.
Absolutely right. Small businesses struggling right now to make ends meet. Thank you very much, Rahel Solomon, for those latest headlines. When we come back on the show, why our next guest says, despite this week's big rally, investors may not be out of the woods just yet. And later on, much more on UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson and his developing condition with the coronavirus. We'll speak with NYU's Dr. Devi, plus why one investment bank says this stay-at-home stock is too rich to buy. A very busy hour still ahead when CNBC returns after this.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Want to know a great way to discover the latest and greatest sports audio on TuneIn? It's easy. Just make sure push notifications are enabled on your phone to receive recommendations of sports talk radio and podcasts, along with important breaking news updates.
Get social with TuneIn. Follow TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to discover what's happening in the app and around the world. Be the first to know about upcoming games and the hottest new music. Follow at TuneIn and always be in the know.
This is Dr. Sanjay Gupta. Join me for CNN's new podcast, Coronavirus, Fact versus Fiction. We know you have questions, and we want to help you find answers. And send me your questions on social media at Dr. Sanjay Gupta.
Make sure to search and listen on TuneIn today.
Hey everyone, it's Tremaine Lee, MSNBC correspondent and host of the new podcast, Into America. In our latest episode, Republican giant and longtime Senator Lindsey Graham is for the first time ever facing a real challenge to his Senate seat. Can a relative newcomer to the scene, a black Democrat in a red state, win this fight? I head to South Carolina to find out. Search for Into America wherever you're listening right now and subscribe.
Not all heroes wear capes, but most wear tights.
And here we go. Now it's underway. Cover on Rowan. 20 seconds.
Keep up with everything happening in the wild world of pro wrestling with the TuneIn podcast. For expert analysis of the latest WrestleMania, turn on the WWE podcast. Or listen to The Steve Austin Show for no-holds-barred conversations with wrestling's biggest personalities.
It's good to be here tonight. It's an empty building. But I'm
For these and more, search sports and scroll down to the world of wrestling.
With so much of our lives spent at home, are you listening to TuneIn all the ways you could be? With compatibility on your phone, tablet, computer, sound system, smart speaker, smartwatch, smart TV, game console, and more.
Welcome back. U.S. markets are looking to build on yesterday's big gains that saw major averages all across the board rise more than 7%. Futures indicating right now a Dow that would open up by about 550 more points, the S&P up by about 55, and the Nasdaq up by 135. Joining me now is Matt Maley, Chief Market Strategist at Miller Tabak. Matt, this is an interesting move here. There were some folks out there who thought after a massive move like yesterday, we'd see a little bit of a pause. It doesn't seem to be happening that way. Does this mean that the all clear sign is out there?
I don't think it does, I'm afraid. One of the things I think is that we're involved in a deleveraging process. It started off with investors deleveraging. I think there'll be several phases of that. But we're going to also see where these companies are starting to deleverage. I mean, a lot of these companies have added a lot of debt over the last 10 years, last 10 to 12 years, adding a lot of leverage to their portfolios. The problem is so much of that went to issues that aren't going to help them service that debt. In other words, stock buybacks. And so we just don't have that. I think as we go into recession, unlike we had in 2018, you'll see companies deleverage, and therefore we'll see another wave down.
So I'm curious, the deleveraging process, the kind of washout, the forced selling, all of that seems like it already happened. And in the meantime, portfolios may have repositioned. Is it still the case that portfolios are aggressively long or levered long and that they need to unwind, or is that part pretty much behind us?
Well, I think a lot of that has already been done. There's no question. So that's why I'm really concerned about it. I mean, we saw that in 2018 where we just had that one whoosh. The market got knocked down, and then everything came back nicely. The problem is when we go into recession, the economy also has to delever. And again, there's a lot of people don't realize how much the economy had levered up during the last 10 or 12 years. That's number one. Number two, we also usually, when you have a bear market rather than just a correction, usually get several waves of liquidation. We certainly saw that in 2008. We saw that in 2000, where the market rallied and recovered, retraced 50% of the initial sell-off, only to roll back over and make a new low. And I think the chances of that happening are very high. Again, that should take the S&P this time up to 2,800 before it retraced 50% of the initial sell-off. And then we roll back over and retest and probably undercut that low by a little bit. This is going to be much more than just a correction, and therefore the deleveraging process will take longer to play out, even though it will probably happen a lot quicker than it has in past bear markets.
All right, so let's talk about. So you laid out a construct that is in your opinion, your base case scenario. Then how exactly do you navigate that? What are you buying? What are you selling? What are you waiting for? And what are you aggressively positioning for as well?
Well, one of the things you can't do is wait and hope to catch that exact bottom. So what I've been saying for the last couple of weeks is to buy for investors to go in to really well-run companies with good balance sheets, good managements, and buy them on a strict scale down basis. And I don't mean saying you buy a little bit here and then buy another down 1%. You buy some at the lows, which I was saying, and then you look to buy maybe another down 5% rather than just down 1%. Then another 5%. Down there. Now, you're never going to buy everything you want to buy, but you're going to build a nice base at a time when people are really starting to sell. I mean, most bear markets have a rally, just like the one I think we're starting right now, that gets people to say, "Oh, this is it. We're going to get back in."
Sure.
Then it fails, and that's what really gets the capitulation, where people finally say, "I give up."
All right, Matt Maley, thank you very much for those market thoughts. We appreciate it. Well, still on deck for the show, another hit for Boeing as it halts plane production at a key U.S. factory. We'll be right back.
Today's big number, 8.24%. That's how much the Russell 2000 jumped yesterday. But despite the gain, the small caps are still down 33.6% from its 52-week intraday high.
Given all the extra time spent at home these days, are you using TuneIn in all the ways you could be? With hundreds of compatible devices, including smart speakers like Sonos, Bose, and Roku, and smart assistants like Alexa and Google Home, there's always a way to listen to the audio you love. Go to TuneIn.com to discover all the ways to listen.
Keep up with everything happening in the wild world of pro wrestling with the TuneIn podcast. For expert analysis straight from the WWE to Steve Austin's no-holds-barred conversations with wrestling's biggest personalities, search sports and scroll down to the world of wrestling to listen.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Get social with TuneIn. Follow TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to discover what's happening in the app and around the world. Be the first to know about upcoming games and the hottest new music. Follow @TuneIn and always be in the know.
Not all heroes wear capes, but most wear tights.
And here we go. Now it's underway. Cover on Rowan. 20 seconds.
Keep up with everything happening in the wild world of pro wrestling with the TuneIn podcast. For expert analysis of the latest WrestleMania, turn on the WWE podcast. Or listen to the Steve Austin Show for no-holds-barred conversations with wrestling's biggest personalities.
It's good to be here tonight. It's an empty building. But
For these and more, search sports and scroll down to the world of wrestling.
Hey everyone, it's Tremaine Lee, MSNBC correspondent and host of the new podcast, Into America. In our latest episode, Republican giant and longtime Senator Lindsey Graham is for the first time ever facing a real challenge to his Senate seat. Can a relative newcomer to the scene, a black Democrat in a red state, win this fight? I head to South Carolina to find out. Search for Into America wherever you're listening right now and subscribe.
This is Dr. Sanjay Gupta. Join me for CNN's new podcast, Coronavirus, Fact versus Fiction. We know you have questions, and we want to help you find answers. And send me your questions on social media at Dr. Sanjay Gupta.
Make sure to search and listen on TuneIn today. Or 24.
Welcome back. S&P 500 pre-market gainers right now showing some signs of life here. We are seeing some moves there as soon as we flash them up, but maybe not. All right, there we go. Carnival and some others coming up there. Well, Amazon is cracking down on people who violate social distancing policies at its warehouses. According to a document obtained by CNBC, the company started notifying employees recently they could face disciplinary action. An Amazon spokesperson confirming the first violation will result in a written warning and a second could actually get them fired. Well, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo extending his state's lockdown as the death toll continues to rise in the nation's biggest hotspot. NBC's Philip Mena is in the New York newsroom with the latest. Good morning, Philip.
Hi, Dom. Good morning. Governor Andrew Cuomo is extending the New York on-pause order through April 29th in a desperate bid to slow the spread of coronavirus. The pandemic has already killed nearly 5,000 people in the state. The extended order means non-essential workers will have to remain home for at least another 3.5 weeks. Meanwhile, a new temporary hospital facility is opening at the USTA Billie Jean King Tennis Center in Queens. Crews have transformed 12 courts into a space that can handle up to 350 patients. It's expected to reach max capacity over the next 2 weeks. And the U.S. Navy hospital ship docked in New York will also begin treating coronavirus patients. The USNS Comfort was originally going to treat non-virus trauma cases in the city. The move adds another 1,000 hospital beds to help battle the pandemic. Tom, back to you.
All right, Philip Mena, thank you very much for those updates. When we come back on the show, a wild ride for oil as OPEC Plus moves closer to an agreement over output cuts, but there's a catch that could derail the whole thing. Plus, why President Trump is taking issue with India over its coronavirus response. CNBC is back right after this.
Given all the extra time spent at home these days, are you using TuneIn in all the ways you could be? With hundreds of compatible devices, including smart speakers like Sonos, Bose, and Roku, and smart assistants like Alexa and Google Home, there's always a way to listen to the audio you love. Go to TuneIn.com to discover all the ways to listen.
Want to know a great way to discover the latest and greatest sports audio on TuneIn? It's easy. Just make sure push notifications are enabled on your phone to receive recommendations of sports talk.
People who know BDO.
It's a familiar story. Allergies ruining your sleep and next day too. Taking Zysol at night relieves allergies while you sleep, so you wake refreshed. Plus, it works faster than Claritin, and on first dose provides the same relief as Zyrtec at nearly half the size. Be wise all. Take Zysol at night.
It's a challenging market. Edward Jones is well aware of that, which is why we're ready to listen and ready to help you find opportunity.
So, let's talk.
Edward Jones, it's time for investing to feel individual.
What you need now is answers to your questions. From moment-to-moment swings.
We've been watching the U.S. equity futures this morning.
To long-term prognosis. Global context. Local data.
We've got record jobless claims.
Bailout progress.
Small business owners are waiting for this money right now.
And market moves.
If you get a bounce at all, sell it.
Online analysis on CNBC.com. And real-time updates on the CNBC app. Stay connected. Stay informed. CNBC. Watch and listen live on the CNBC app.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Did you know TuneIn doesn't just live here on your smart speaker? From the audio that moves you to the audio that gets you moving. Soundtrack your every movement with the free TuneIn app. Available on your phone or tablet. Download TuneIn from the App Store today.
Get social with TuneIn. Follow TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to discover what's happening in the app and around the world. Be the first to know about upcoming games and the hottest new music. Follow @TuneIn and always be in the know.
Keep up with everything happening in the wild world of pro wrestling with a TuneIn podcast. For expert analysis straight from the WWE to Steve Austin's no-holds-barred conversations with wrestling's biggest personalities, search sports and scroll down to the world of wrestling to listen.
Stocks looking to build on yesterday's solid gains, with Dow futures pointing to a triple-digit higher open. This as new signs of hope emerge around coronavirus, while a new CNBC poll reveals a growing number of Americans are increasingly worried about the outbreak. Amid those fears, increasing momentum for more stimulus measures as the Trump administration and lawmakers mull another rescue package. It's Tuesday, April 7th, 2020. You are watching CNBC. Welcome back to the show. I'm Dominic Chu, live at CNBC Global Headquarters, kicking off this morning with breaking news. Again, stocks set to surge at the opening bell. Right now, Dow futures are indicating what could be a 600-point rise in the blue chip average. The S&P 500 implied up 63 points, and the Nasdaq would open up by 153 points if these futures moves hold into the opening bell for regular cash equities trading. Now, this after what would have normally been a historic rally for Wall Street, with the Dow surging more than 1,600 points in just a single day. But believe it or not, it was only the blue chip's best day since March 24th, and only its third biggest point gain ever. Now, heading into this morning's trade, the Dow and S&P 500 remain more than 20% below their all-time highs earlier this year. The Nasdaq is just about 19% below its record high level as well. Let's now go worldwide. Matt Taylor is standing by in Singapore with the overnight trade in Asian markets. Juliana Tattlebaum has the early action from the European bourses. And Matt, we will start with you.
Thanks again, Don. We did see a mostly positive session right across the Asia-Pacific markets, but a number of these indices really closing off of the higher levels of the day. I want to go to Japan first, because we have had some developing news there just in the last hour or so, with news of this record-breaking stimulus package being approved by Cabinet. The Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe confirming the 108 trillion yen, or about $990 billion US package that will include payments to families and small businesses as well, of course, affected by the fallout from the coronavirus shutdown. Japan also announcing a state of emergency in 7 prefectures, including Tokyo and Osaka, and the aim there is to reduce movement across these prefectures by between 70 to 80%. Elsewhere today, we also saw some gains, fairly strong gains coming through from South Korea, and this was helped out by shares of Samsung. Samsung Electronics are saying that its Q1 operating profit number is going to come in better than what analysts had been expecting. It is now tipping that Q1 profit will be at 6.4 trillion Korean won against the analyst expectations for a figure of about 6.2 trillion won. So we saw Samsung shares moving higher, of course, a blue chip on the South Korean market, and that really helped out the Kospi to some fairly strong gains in the session today. China returning from a public holiday as well. It managed to move higher, of course, was closed out for the session yesterday, but up by better than 1%. Don, back to you.
Taylor, thank you very much for that update on the Asian trade. To the early trade in Europe now. Juliana Tattlebaum is standing by. Juliana, good morning.
Morning, Dom. Well, European markets are extending gains this morning after yesterday the main benchmark gained about 3.7%. Today, Germany is leading the way higher. And when we look at the sectors, it's fairly broad-based, the strength that we're seeing come through. The cyclical sectors, though, are outperforming. So some of those sectors that were hardest hit in recent weeks, travel and leisure and autos getting a particularly strong bid from investors. On the flip side, the underperforming parts of the market are those more defensive baskets. So healthcare and food and beverage stocks are underperforming. More companies today coming out with measures to shore up their balance sheets. A couple of examples, the aerospace and defense supplier Thales has come out, suspended its outlook for the year and cut its dividend. Also in the airline space, low-cost carrier EasyJet has come out saying they've secured new funds from the UK Treasury. So companies taking more measures themselves to ensure they have the cash to withstand the continued fallout from coronavirus and the lockdowns. One more metric for you, the Eurostoxx volatility index has hit